Well, all right. So I'm 8 episodes, not all 50 minutes long, into James Tour's course on abiogenesis, and what qualifies me to say anything about this? Well, I'm formally educated in it, self-educated in it, more than a casual observer, but in no way anything more than an enthusiastic follower of some quite eloquent speakers on the subject. Now, first thing I would say is that James Tour makes the case that all of the stereoisomers that we use in synthesis are extracted from nature, and that we do not have a synthesis method in a modern world to produce stereoisomers, either of um, precursors or biologically functioning molecules. And there are two main groups, no, three main groups: the stereoisomers that are the sugar stereoisomers, which are huge in number, the 20 odd amino acids, of which those used in biology have been somehow selected from a vast hypothetical, no, not hypothetical, a vast actual molecular array. And finally, the stereoisomerism of. Geez, I can't even get to the three groups because I'm thinking stereoisomerism is a huge issue for, shall we call it, evolutionary biology to adopt. But in myself, in my dialogue with myself over this subject, I'm now thinking all stereoisomers point to a molecule that exists after there has been life. So the presence of stereoisomerism is an indicator of life. I don't mean the existence of stereoisomer in nature. I mean the predominance of a left-handed or a right-handed version of a molecule. And that if there was any one focus that some uh, chemist or physicist could bring to this, it would be what mechanisms could create a preponderance of, not even a preponderance, a total dominance of one-handed molecule over another when there are no uh, physical way, for the physical characteristics such as boiling point, solubility, miscibility, are indistinguishable between the stereoisomers. Now, any origin of life researcher that starts with a purely a non-racemic mix is James Tory arguing that those people are misleading. No, they're not misleading, but some of their papers are hyperbole, and the premise that they are producing good chemistry is contingent on the fact that we acknowledge they are not using prebiotic precursors. Now, nobody likes being told they're making no progress. But that's possibly why James Tour gets beaten up. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond picking at him, simply saying you're not playing well enough as a team. Because they go after him because of a professed faith as a Christian. And that is awkward, because there's nothing that we shouldn't. No, I'm not even going to comment in that whole area for a moment. Stay fixated on the chemistry. Now, what do we know about the chemistry? We know the chemistry is spontaneous reactions have Gibbs free energy, and that life is exceptional at developing pathways around the Gibbs free energy of zero. To sort of it loves to shed energy at every opportunity and release free energy is a kind of concept akin to energy of the entropy, rather, of the entropy of the universe increasing. This is all about localized systems in which the second law of thermodynamics illusorily is locally suspended or reversed. And Schrödinger, of all people, had something to say about this. Be interesting for James Dorr and me to do a reading of Schrödinger's early paper on the subject, because he's a chemist that people follow and have heard about, think they know about. Now, James, my serious point though is some of your examples. I'm trying to put into words the actual logical flaw in some of the things you're saying, and it is this: you can't use starch. You mustn't fall into the same trap as the people who you're arguing against have fallen. They think that they're doing a prebiotic synthesis because they think they've got the compound that must have existed in a prebiotic earth. Your point is that that molecule exists in a sea of chaos, whereas they believe there must be some concentrating mechanism. So again, we're back to this: how does the concentrating thing take place? The localization. You're good on localizing it in time, and also it has to be localized no, it has to be probabilistically acceptable. And where? But you can't use start. You can't use these. Yeah, you can't use the. I suppose I want to just gush out that it's the ribosomal subunit assembly thing that basically takes precursor molecules or the carrier system. I'm talking about the biology now, the mechanism of protein synthesis on the ribosomal units. That's obviously a biological post prebiotic system. But what we're trying to do is understand what those systems are, and those systems are taking yeah, they're not just stringing them together, they're stringing them together within the ribosomal unit. That takes it out of aqueous solution and allows the synthesis to go on. I think you're not being quite. You could say that. By the time you've got to episode 8, 48 minutes in. Let's try and say it together. The synthesis of biological macromolecules, where they are condensation reactions. Now this is, you see, how does the plant do condensation reactions between sugars? Then I don't see the plant spinning out cellulose. I don't actually know how cellulose is deposited, do I? Or do I? Other than it has tertiary structure, in which I'm interested, and which I want to talk to you about in the context of graphene. But focusing on what you've had to say here. Is the assembly of the pre-prokaryotic ribosomal subunits. Am I right or am I wrong? We should. That's the priority for focus. I know there's a lot of work being done on it, and I'm a bit weak on it. In fact, it's a bit embarrassing how weak I would be on that. But I do now see it as a way in which the earliest living thing is something that permits condensation reactions to take place in a aqueous milieu, because it pulls in stereoisometrically the same form through some kind of system to exclude the water molecules, and curls them through somehow, doesn't it? But what it actually pulls through is the ticker tape. And then there's this issue that they don't like you that's about saying about information. What you mean is Which came first, the codon or the DNA? How could the codons pre-exist? The messenger RNA. The transfer RNA, that's the one how does the transfer RNA attach to a specific amino acid? The specificity of that is high, isn't it? Zip fasteners comes to mind. So basically, if I was you, I'd put a little postscript in on the question of starch, and you could set off a little wildfire there, I would say. If you were to say, hey, but guys, Simon pointed out, no, you don't have to point out that I said it. Someone pointed out that I was wrong on starch because I'm using an example of a biological model in a pre-biological world. And so the probability of how starch could possibly be controlled and of significance in an evolutionary context as a molecule is irrelevant. Interesting, fascinating even. In fact, you could say obsessive since it's a foodstuff and something that would be of interest to someone who's an agricultural scientist or food processing technician. But that molecule's irrelevant in a prebiotic world. There's no way that the universe is directed to produce starch. Organisms produce starch. Some kinds of organisms, some kind of plants, as a food storage mechanism, which humans have co-opted. To derive their own sustenance. But such conscious or unconscious behavior on the part of primitive savages digging up roots or modern farmers planting potatoes and turning them into crisps is utterly irrelevant. In a probiotic world. Your views, interestingly enough, out on you cannot have got 8 hours into abiogenesis without mentioning the fact that we're on a planet with subduction zones, and you've got black smokers and white smokers and all of that nonsense going on. Well, not nonsense, from my understanding. The elephant in the room. So at 8 hours in, starch is irrelevant. You make some extremely eloquent points. It does need to be summarized. You can hold your head up as far as I'm concerned in answering Professor Dave. And in an ideal world, Professor Dave would back down. Professor Dave should eat humble pie. I'd like to give him a lesson in that. Alright, 4 minutes. We'll finish this one out, make a cup of coffee, and start on episode 9, eh, James?